Good morning, everybody. A very happy Friday morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I am Chamberlain. So
it's Friday already. I can't believe you certainly remember that one, won't you? Good morning and welcome. I'm welcome, Yusuf.
Well, what can I say? Thank God it's Friday. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I am Bukola Samuel Webimo.
Well, the calendar is here again. And guess what? It's the 13th day of the year already. Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Yeah, it's 13th day in the 13th month. Sorry, in the first month of the year. So
I know where that's coming from. When some people get 13th month, you know that bonus you get at the end of the year, they call it 13th month. So 13th month of the year.
Oh, okay. So, okay, that's what that means. Oh, okay, I see. I get your point now. But I understand actually. But guys, look. Today also happens to be, remember the CBN has said that banks have to ensure that no more old currency notes. So if you get to the bank today, you expect that you get those, those new ones. That's the ones you're supposed to get from the banks. But then yesterday, the Independent National Electoral Commission did announce an extension for you to go out there and get your permanent voter cards. So first, we'll let you listen to this report. We just went to town to highlight some of the developments, how it is with people out there who are trying to pick up their cards, and then we'll be back in a moment.
The year 2022 started with high hopes for Nigeria, as projections by the World Bank revealed that the country's economy would grow to about 3.8%. For an economy that was only trying to recover from the global effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, that projection was good news. However, all that began to change owing to the disruptions caused by insecurity, low revenue generation, especially arising from a deep cut in crude oil production. The Russia-Ukraine war has also impacted the economy, as some critical imports such as wheat continue to be disrupted. By the end of the third quarter, the World Bank advised that the nation had to make hard choices or face a worse economic downturn in the months and years ahead, as it reviewed downward its growth projection to 3.1%. The World Bank backed its advice with some economic realities, such as slow economic growth in the third quarter due to a weak performance in critical areas of the economy. Key macroeconomic indices such as the rising inflation currently at 21.47% as at November, from the October rate of 21.09%, low debt to GDP ratio, low external reserves, sharp cuts in crude oil production, flooding, job losses and revenue shortfall still raised concerns.
Once there is security, investment will come. Investment cannot come without security. First thing first. You are not also sure that your investment will be safe because of insecurity. That's number one. Then number two, once the insecurity comes, people will invest in manufacturing and they will invest in agriculture. Agriculture has to be revived. And revive in a way that agriculture works in most countries.
With these new trajectories, it may just be high time for the government to change its plans. While Nigerians were still grappling with the rising inflation and its attendant effect on food prices and the general cost of living, then came the floods, with devastating effect on farmlands and crops. Virtually every state in the country was seriously affected, displacing over 1.4 million persons. Approximately 2,776 persons were injured, while 612 persons lost their lives. This, however, came with assurances from the government through the provision of relief materials and funding to boost dry season farming to cushion the effects.
The bank released a sum of 57.9 billion under the Anchor Borrowers program to 185,972 new projects for the cultivation of rice, wheat, and maize, bringing the cumulative disbursement under the program to 1.01 trillion naira disbursed over 4.2 million smallholder farmers cultivating 21 different commodities across the country.
Notwithstanding the current situation, the government says it's taken hard decisions to improve key economic indices and insists that the nation is not broke, given its debt stock and other worrisome economic indices.
Oil revenue is underperforming because of the criminality, but recently NNPC has reported that that has been curtailed, and we're already beginning to see the pick up in the production volumes, which will mean that more revenues will come to the Federation. You're broke when you don't have anything coming in.
And just before the end of the year, the Apex Bank in October came up with a policy to redesign the Naira. The bank cited reasons such as the need to take control of currency in circulation and address the hoarding of Naira notes outside the banking system, the shortage of clean and fit notes in circulation, and the increase in counterfeiting of high-denomination Naira banknotes. This was then followed by the pegging of the limit of cash withdrawal at 20,000 Naira daily withdrawal limit on individual accounts and 50,000 Naira limit on over-the-counter third-party checks. This generated a lot of debate from Nigerians. And after a back and forth with members of the National Assembly, the central bank increased the withdrawal limit to 500,000 Naira weekly for individuals and 5 million Naira for corporate bodies, but with strict conditions. As the year 2022 winds down, many hope that the right economic policies and decisions will be made going forward, such that the economy can find its footing in 2023 and beyond.
Okay, well, actually, yes, the economy is part of what a lot of people will consider while they do go out there and vote. So we'll focus on that particular scenario in the course of the program and as we progress today. So just compartmentalize that in your memory this morning as we progress. But it's about the extension of the collection of permanent voter cards by INEC. They say they are encouraged about how people have come out, the turnout. In some states, 100,000 PVCs in a week. So we've got a week more to go out there and pick it up. But, you know, when these kind of things happen, you were saying that you hope that lots of people will not relax, thinking that, okay, I've got a little more time. No, you should actually go out there a lot more. So all of those chaps who did complain about not being able to get their cards because they were of one reason or the other, here's your chance now to go ahead.
Well, Chimalaine, I was actually hoping that, we'll be able to play this report again, just in case that INEC officials are listening, because even though this is Lagos, some people will say that Lagos is unique in terms of its population, there needs to be a review of, those areas where they have a huge population of those collecting. Some people have spotted that it is possible that INEC officials are understaffed, or INEC is understaffed in terms of the ad hoc members of staff. Somebody was saying, I went there at 8:30 a.m. yesterday, and by that time I was told I was too late to collect my PVC because people are taking numbers. So she said that by the time she got there, there were over 300 people, already on the queue. So she was they couldn't take her number. So I think, we can listen to the report, and, I hope that, there will be some review as to the current manner operations are happening at the PVC collection centers.
In less than 2 months, the electorates will be heading to the polls at various units to choose their next leaders. The Independent National Electoral Commission says over 93 million Nigerians are registered to vote in the elections. In the Lagos metropolis, some residents give their assessments on the process for collection. At the Isheri Junior Grammar School, quite a number of people were seen in the process of PVC collection after undergoing clearance by INEC staff to ascertain their registration areas.
I feel that if you come at 8:30 as I came, I should be able to get number. because they are supposed to start at 9 and they didn't come until 9:45. And at 8:30, they said the number, they collect only 300 numbers, and I was late at 8:30.
The story is almost the same at the Agidimbi Technical College, as some prefer solutions to hitches observed.
The experience I saw for here in the morning, I came, they arranged well, the right people name, transfer and collection. So they bring 2 lines, transfer lines and collection line. So everything is normal, they do well.
I was there as early as 5 o'clock this morning. No stress, no fights. And I was the one who was collecting the list, writing down their name.
I feel that INEC, being a government institution, should be much more organized in the disbursement of the cards. I don't know what's currently happening, but I can see that they are somewhat understaffed. One person cannot be doing sharing of cards and doing sharing of cards for people that are doing transfer and people that are collecting their PVCs.
Although there are many Nigerians who are unaware of the appropriate place to pick up their PVCs, information on various collection points and relevant dates have been provided on INEC's website to guide potential voters and make the process hitch-free. Dominic Iwiwu, Channels Television News.
Well, first of all, the good part of it is the healthy turnout of Nigerians there who are interested in the process enough to lose their sleep and come out and collect their PVC. But then again, we can't discountenance, the problems that characterize the process of PVC collection, and which have been rightly pointed out, by that citizen who spoke about, the inadequate staff, and that are there, that are not enough, to aid the collection process, and that's just part of the problem. Other reports show that the movement of the PVC collection to the ward level have thrown out even some more problems, because some people registered, for instance, at Isheri here, but they now have to go further down, perhaps to other areas within the local government to get their PVC. And for many Nigerians, that's an inconvenience on their part. Imagine losing your sleep in the morning just to go collect your PVC, and you're still unable to collect your PVC. And there's just a few more days before the ward collection of PVC ends, and then the PVCs are moved to local governments before they can get them. So that means that citizens have to make even more sacrifices just to be able to collect their PVC. So these are some of the problems that INEC should take a second look at: inadequate staff, the distance for some people. We can't say it enough that why shouldn't INEC make use of technology, send messages to people about where exactly they should collect their PVC. And I believe that Ayo is going to talk a bit more about that. How did you get your PVC, by the way? You have it now.
Yeah. Okay. You can see it. It's my permanent voter card. So, yeah, it is there. I saw what you did on Twitter. Well, first of all, it's better to be advised on how, these things ought to be. It is natural for everyone who wants to get their PVCs to go all out and say, look, I'm going to get it whatever happens, and people get there as early as they can. By the time I'm done at work, the place is already besieged. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, but I was advised to go later in the day, by which time many of the INEC officials would be returning from the wards with the packs of cards that they were supposed to give to people. And that's how I think I got mine sometime around 4 p.m., 5 p.m. of that particular day at the time. So that's one of the things that the counsel that I got that helped me to get this done. So maybe that's something that INEC wants to speak to as well. But there's something critical that Chamberlain mentioned, and that's the fact that because of the encouragement that INEC received from people going out to collect their voter cards, there's been an extension, consequential adjustment of the collection by location. One, collection at registration area, that's your ward, is extended by 1 week from Monday 16th to Sunday 22nd January 2023. And collection at local government level will resume on Monday 23rd to Sunday 29th January 2023. So now you know. And there are those who have even made arrangement. INEC was magnanimous enough to make arrangement for some estates who say, look, come, you know, they'll take some estates, some PVCs to certain particular estates for people to collect, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, so to speak, for some people to get theirs. But the INEC officials go to the wards. The problem is some people don't even know their voting wards, which is why it is important for you to go to voter.inecnigeria.org. You'll be able to know where your ward is. It's a street around your house. So where your ward is, and you'll be able to go there and collect it, especially on weekends in case you are not at home on weekdays. Chamberlain.
So go ahead and do that now. Don't think because of the deadline you have time. No, you don't actually. So just go as quick as you can. And we'll also take a look at some of the dailies as quick as we can, probably. Yeah. And we'll start with the Guardian newspaper this morning. And we started out by telling you about the banks. But look at this. Banks defy CBN. Continue issuing old Naira notes. New banknotes still scanty. Only 1 out of 9 banks in Boko issuing new notes. In Benue, new notes treated as souvenirs. Oh dear. Oh boy.
What scarcity causes?
And counter customers tackle cashiers over mutilated notes. Long queues at ATMs paying new Naira. Apex Bank kicks off sensitization program. So I imagine that the CBN, Director of Currency, they'll all be thinking a thing or two now about perhaps having seen these headlines, and probably they might put up a message out there sooner rather than later, or take action, who knows. But this is the big lead on the front page here today, so you might as well go ahead and check it out. I never want a third-term presidency, says Obasanjo. That's right at that bottom strip. He's saying that for the 18th time. But then some still keep going on about this. Anyways, that is the Guardian today.
Well, the Vanguard is the next one for you. Look at what they have. Petrol scarcity lingers as private depots sell at 240 Naira per litre. Shortage may continue till June. That's from Ipman. Yeah, they saw the queues in Lagos, and now they're already filtering into Abuja. I do not know what it's like in your area, but you might want to let us know how easy it is to come by the product. The black marketers are back again, at least here in the FCT. Look at that. The rider is already even pointing in that direction. Queues increase in Abuja, Lagos, others. So if you fall into the others, let us know where your others are. 7 private depots reopened. Regulators not at filling stations as commuter pay high fares. So all of this have a domino effect. Page 5 is where you see details. Of course, we've also seen this story. INEC extends PVC collection deadline to January 29 to punish staff over alleged extortion, discriminatory issuance. That is also there on the front page. They hear the complaints, certainly. Look at this. IPOP disowns alleged female executioner. It's on page 11 of the paper. Umu's murdered as a lady that was killed in Kaduna. I stabbed her unknowingly. Chinese national tells court. They have a number of other stories for you at the bottom. Sports is also making the rounds. Looks like AJ is about to go back to the ring. AJ's career finished if he loses fight in April. Don't worry, he won't lose. Let's leave it there for Vanguard and Vanguard Sports.
And flip to the Nigerian Tribune. Margaret, I was hoping that you would take us through Mr. and Mrs. since it's Friday, but okay, you're forgiving. So, Tribune leads with PVC collection, and this is how it is captioned. Now, INEC bows to pressure, extends deadline. Grateful for that, so that more PVCs can be collected, and we'll have a reduction from that 6.7 million quoted by the Commission as at 4 days ago, I believe. But this is a page 5 read. Going a bit further down, you'll find this one. under the big story. No official letter informing me of Buhari's visit. Ohinoi replies below. Perhaps that's a follow-up to the commissioning of some landmark projects in Kogi State some weeks ago, towards the end of 2022, I believe. There's this one on security. Gunmen attack vigilante operatives, kill 4 in Anambra. We hope that's nipped in the bud, especially as we head to the polls. But if you're interested in that story, you find it on page 26 of the Nigerian Tribune. There's also this one that borders on security. How I lost mom to trauma while I was in prison. It's a follow-up on the EndSARS event of 2020. It's a page 28 read of the Nigerian Tribune. And this one also from yesterday, the president is speaking. He has a word for the international community. And he says, don't interfere with our election, Buhari warns foreign governments. There's quite a number of other stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, but I'll leave you to follow up on that on your own. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian Tribune.
This Nigeria leads with that last story you highlighted. This Nigeria is the next newspaper this morning, and this is what you find on the front page. Polls, don't meddle. Just 2 words. Buhari cautions foreign nations, says Nigeria working with ECOWAS to secure region, halt coups. That story you'll find details of on page 4 of the paper. And at the bottom of the page, troops arrest 19 oil thieves, recover over 1 million liters of AGO, others. AGO is diesel, by the way. The story you'll find on pages 7 and 16. As military kills 91 terrorists in 3 weeks. Well, Mark, you were talking about the front page of the Vanguard newspaper concerning fuel supply in Lagos. Well, be it known unto thee that the queues are still there, and they are not selling for, on the average, it's just a figure that you have right there. Even the NNPC fuel stations in Lagos sell between 169 and 170 naira, depending on where you get it from. But most other fuel stations selling well above 165 naira and maybe 240, 250 naira, depending on what location in Lagos.
Even the major marketers now, we can't mention their name, are selling above 165 naira. You know, the
NNPC
lowest price is 180 naira per liter.
NNPC is not selling at 165 naira, selling minimum 169 naira, 170 naira in Lagos state of Nigeria today. So what are we talking about? Anyway,
and the maximum, by the way, you can purchase from the NNPC is 5,000 naira. And there's an illegal collection of 500 naira per vehicle. You know, I'm talking about at least an NNPC station where I purchased petrol from in recent times. So, well, the regulatory authority should look into that.
No, the NNPC itself should look into that,
yeah.
Most certainly. How's this Nigerian newspaper this morning?
Even those first. Okay, take a look at Daily Trust this morning. Tinubu, Atiku, Kwankwaso, Obi scramble for Kano's 5.9 million votes. Can you beat that? Hey, where's the Labour Party? Okay. APC banking on Buhari, Ganduje, others. PDP relying on Shekarau. Work against me and regret it. Kwankwaso warns Ganduje. Why Kano is the bride, Professor Fage. So there you go. So they have a list of the 4. They have a list of 4 candidates there: Atiku, Obi, Tinubu, and Kwankwaso. So there you go. And then they also have this story: CBN to sanction banks holding new Naira notes. So you heard. That is Daily Trust today.
Banks are holding new Naira notes?
That's what it means, because if CBN has said they've given them these notes, why are they not issuing them to people then? So now, they should bite this time and not just bark, CBN.
Well, Leadership Friday has this 2023 polls. Don't interfere in our elections, PMB tells foreign powers. Asks diplomats to stay within official limits. Obasanjo warns against voting nation destroyers. Urges electorate to consider candidates' mental, physical fitness. So these are some of the criteria the ex-president is asking you to look at. Election not by tribe, religion, says Obi. Page 4 is where you'll see details. And look at this, Buhari's critics are ignorant, attributed to the federal government. Terrorism, federal government secures 397 convictions in 7 years. The story is on page 6 of the paper. Troops kill 75 terrorists, capture 65, rescue 115 civilians. That is from the DHQ. And I'm sure you saw this yesterday. EFCC frees Okukpe after DSS arrest. So said it was done in error. Some watch list that was not updated for over 6 years. And Azu is writing on the back page, conversation with Azu is titled, Why They Shoot Friends and Spare the Enemy. It's an article honoring and highlighting the killing of Bolanle Rahim and all the other extrajudicial killings are done by the police. Let's leave it there for Leadership newspapers.
From Leadership newspaper, I believe we have one more for you this morning. It's the New Telegraph. The New Telegraph this morning leads with PVC collection as well. INEC extends PVC collection by 1 week. It's a hot topic. Let's take a look at the riders. Warns against discriminatory issuance to commence training, screening for ad hoc workers in Niger State. It's a page 38 and 28. Read inside New Telegraph. It's a bit late in the day to commence training, just a few weeks to the election. We can't talk enough about how training ought to have commenced well before now, such that the staff, the ad hoc staff, will be ready for the process, and there'll be no excuses for delaying commencement, delaying arrival of materials, all bar all hitches, so to speak, ahead of the polls.
I'm just gonna, one of the things that we do not have, which is justifiable for us, is that we can't even trust most of these organizations anymore. So, but INEC has been performing its role as creditably as possible. And given the fact that you have to deal with 93 million voters and a huge quantum of logistics, I think one can give INEC a little, whatever. At the end of the day, what is important is this election must be credible.
Yeah.
People must be able to vote. Now look at the extension of this, PVC collection deadline. What are the implications? We won't know. But INEC should be able to say, okay, in the event that you need help, let us know. Okay. A quick look at the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning, and this is what you have on its front page. FG generates 1.8 trillion naira from sales of forfeited assets. That's concerning proceeds of crime. Government profiled total of 3,000 terrorism cases in 8 years, as ascribed to Malami. Over 7,000 maritime armed robbery, vandalization, financial matters, cybercrime, kidnapping, and anti-corruption cases prosecuted. Now, that's a lot. That and several other stories, many of which we have mentioned, are on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. And with that, we have come to the end of a look at the papers and beginning the show in earnest after this break. Stay with us.
It is the first workday of 2023, and the President begins the year by presiding over the signing ceremony of the final budget of his presidency at the Council Chamber. Themed a budget of fiscal sustainability and transition, the President, flanked by the leadership of the National Assembly and some members of the executive, then signed the 2023 appropriation bill alongside the 2022 supplementary budget into law. The president remarks that in spite of his signing, there are concerns bordering on changes to the executive budget proposal made by the National Assembly, which needs to be addressed.
I have also noted that the National Assembly introduced new projects into the 2023 budget proposal, for which it has appropriated 770.72 billion naira. The National Assembly also increased the provisions made by ministries, departments and agencies by 58.55 billion naira. Nonetheless, considering the imminent transition process to another democratically elected government, I decided to sign the 2023 appropriation bill into law as passed by the National Assembly to enable its implementation to commence without delay. I have, however, directed the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning to engage with the legislature to revisit some of the changes made to the executive budget proposal.
The president made clear that the budget design takes into consideration strengthening the economy as well as smooth conduct of the elections and transition. He equally urged the legislative body to reconsider its stance on the proposed ways and means advance from the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Failure to grant the securitization approval will, however, cost the government about 1.8 trillion naira in additional interest.
The leadership of the National Assembly subsequently responds to the president's earlier request.
While we are trying to consider and pass the request, we will insist on getting the right documents for our committees to ensure that whatever they advise us to do in the two chambers are based on information and knowledge, and not just passing ways and means without knowing what it is.
The executive did everything they could, and we have even a wider view, a bird's eye view of what's going on in all the agencies, and we have also complimented what the executive has done. There's no you did, you didn't do. No, it's all for the good of the country.
Now, as a matter of routine, the Minister of Finance will give a breakdown of the 2023 budget at least before Wednesday. But more importantly, it appears as though the executive and legislative arm have decided to take up the challenge of ramping up the nation's revenue and minimizing deficits. Now, these are critical issues they say will receive utmost attention before the end of this administration. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, yes, as you see there, Professor Patutomi joins us now. He is the convener of the Big Tent, among several other designations. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for coming.
Good morning. I'm glad to be able to join you.
Let's start on a light note. I mean, you've been in government circles a long time. You've been monitoring developments. You've gone from almost in several professions, really: media, economy, politics, in and around. But could you start by telling us, I mean, while you served as SA to former President Shagari at the time, what was it like? I mean, you were in your 30s at the time.
No, 20s, actually.
20s. What was the environment like at the time?
Environment was different. In spite of all the things we said about that era, Nigeria was a country that was more inclusive, more merit-driven, more challenge. Let's even take how I got into government. Today, very sadly, most people who have a position in government have had deals. They've first bribed somebody 30,000 for their name to get into a conversation, and all kinds of silly things that happen. Then you're told, if you get that position, X% of your budget will come to me as a man who opened the door. I was just a kid, 26-year-old PhD, who returned to the country, who had ideas about how to transform the country. And the leaders were watching, reading, and they said, how can we find that guy? And one day, I showed up, and they said, look, this thing you're talking about, tax policy, what can we do about it? And I went off, blah, 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 blah. And the next week, they called me and said, can you replace this man who was my professor? That's the kind of country that I came back into as a young person. putrid level of corruption today, the narcissism, the self-love that consumes people not thinking about the common good is so painful to watch. And if you see, you can't call it, it's not theory anymore because you can see its consequence in the slide of our country. I don't think any Nigerian who is reasonable can say their life is better today than it was 8 years ago. None.
So while you were there, were you able to directly influence policies?
Well, clearly, you know, if you are in that kind of position, especially back in those days, people considered ideas, thought was very critical. I'm not sure that it matters that much today. This is why we need to bring the momentum of what's going wrong in our country to a halt and literally begin again. I think that we make light. I mean, just watch the clip of the budget being passed and all of that. If you just looked at that document and you really know anything, you'll feel sick. Because what Nigeria desperately, desperately needs today is to provide opportunities, growth, employment to its teeming young people. And there are possibilities of extracting demographic dividend from youth bulge in our country. Does our budget look like anything trying to achieve that? What's going on is that people have pet projects that you can extract rent from the system from, they've pushed in, and you've got this bloated thing. And I can feel very pained and very sorry for how our country has evolved. Thankfully, it's possible to change these things, to stop that momentum. You know, I like to think of examples, and you can even go to corporate world. There was a time when IBM ruled the world. It was the biggest corporation in the world. The big man who built IBM said, this is the way we do it, and corporate planning took it down, and all of that. And IBM began to lose grip and began to, in the end, the board realized the problem is us. We've got to get new thinking, and we've got to find people who have not been part of this mess. In the famous Einstein dictum, you know, the level of thinking that got us here is not the one that will solve the problem. So you need some kind of outside thinking. And they broke every rule. They went to RBG in Nabisco and hired a man who knew nothing about computers. And of course, everybody must have read the book that Louis Gessner Jr. wrote after he turned IBM around, who says elephants can't dance. We want to teach this elephant called Nigeria how to dance again, because it is possible. But we can't teach it how to dance with the people who created this mess, because they don't even understand that Nigeria is in a mess. Somehow the way that they see the prisms are such that they don't know what is really happening to their country.
You know, when you talk about they, you know, you have also been a part of the system. Sure. You see that there's a group of people who, you know, whom you're referring to. But generally, it would seem that at every point in time, so from the time of Shehu Shagari, we had a president, former president, or military head of state, IBB. Also, we had Buhari before the IBB. Then we had, after him, Abacha, a brief period, Shoneko, and then Abdul Salami, Abubakar, and then we now had Obasanjo. These people have been in the system, each person doing what they think that they can do to improve the system, at least at the time when they're there. We see efforts, but somehow it would seem that there are some fundamentals which have made it impossible for us to be able, despite best efforts of the people, or maybe if you don't think that they're good enough, the efforts are good enough, in spite of their efforts, you know, it hasn't changed, for instance, our rentier economy, our extractive economy, from what it used to be. And some people say, oh, this actually has to do with how Nigeria itself was created.
It's not quite true. You know, what's the most important things that leaders do? Most important things that leaders do is set the tone of culture. I'll give you a small example. When General Buhari was elected, in 2015, Abuja froze. People stopped all those funny practices for a while because they were scared of the consequence of behaving that way. They just watched, and after a few months, they saw same guys doing same things, and everybody went back with greater, gusto, So Nigeria can change, and leadership sets the tone of culture. I've watched this happen in several iterations. As an example I like to give, which includes even matters of budget and all of that. You talked about how I've been around for a long time. Indeed, this year is 50 years since I became an activist as a student at the University of Nigeria. We tried to overthrow the Student Union, created the Student Democratic Society, and so 50 years of doing this, and I can tell you where the problems are. General Obasanjo, I have fought for 50 years as a student, but I have a lot of respect for him because you can see leadership in what he does at many points in Nigeria's history. When he was head of state back in the 70s, oil prices took a dip. He realized something had to be done, and he set the tone by saying, me, head of state, 504, Porsche 504, the official car for the head of state. And everybody goes down from there. Just that sensitivity is the power of leadership and culture. We've watched our country in the last couple of years drop into some incredible things like poverty capital of the world, and we know the statistics is death at childbirth and all of those things. On every Millennium Development Goal that makes sense, Nigeria is almost at the bottom. And you watch the swagger, what you guys call it, swag, of those in power, and you wonder, are they sane? People should respond to those things with certain ways of seeing problems and how they should be solved. But we carry on. I mean, there was a time that a president of Nigeria said, wait a minute, you can measure the growth of our country by the fact that we're becoming the fastest growing private jets market in Nigeria. Whew. I was so incensed I called the villa. That was the only time I called the villa during that particular administration. Please beg him not to say that again. Because a country that was creating less and less wealth was having more and more people own private jets. If somebody doesn't see the fundamental problem in that, I have no problem in private jets. You can own 10 if you want. If you create the wealth, we will see the jobs that are created out of that process of wealth creation. And if what amuses you is private jets, have them as a toy. Mm-hmm. But Nigeria was not creating wealth. It was not growing. It's young people increasingly unemployed. And what do we see? What we see is a disconnect between the state and society. People who don't seem to understand that their primary responsibility as people in public authority is the common good of all. And that narcissism needs to be broken for us to reinvent Nigeria. That's where we are.
If I could just come in, Prof, I mean, we looking through, just as Michael highlighted, different governments have come, administrations have gone. And for the most part, lots of people who worked and served with them, or even if you go down to the states, the governors, they all come from society into government. And today, that is how it will always be. But even sometimes you just wonder, so why is it that we haven't been able to have some sort of impact from people who have come from society into governance? And it appears as though even if they had lofty ideas while out there, once they get into government, things change.
Yeah. And this is because people have not had the courage of moral conviction. And me, public officials, like you say, have been around for like a bad coin forever. They come to me. I get on a flight, and a senator comes to me and says, Prof, what we do in that place, I didn't want to be like that. I got there. I was literally threatened by colleagues and this and this and this and that. I smile. I say a few polite things, and I say to them, but small number of you who think the right things should be done can get together and begin to make a difference, take a stand. The problem is we are increasingly numb to what is right because of some fundamental errors. One of those fundamental errors was 1999, and I'm part of the blame. What happened in 1999, 98, 99? I mean, we did the fighting to get the military out. I mean, we nearly took the bullet for it, but that's another matter. Military decides it's going. And we had to get together a group that I was part of founding called the Concerned Professionals. So what do? There were two views. Get into politics, all these things we've been writing every day that Abacha wanted to kill us for and all of that. Let's just go and implement that. Some said, we're citizens. That's our citizen duty. Let's allow politicians to now come, hoping they've learned lessons from the errors that brought the military. And we'll have a country that can thrive. Others said, well, let's just go in there and get it done, whatever. In the end, those who said we're just citizens playing our duty won. And I'd like to say that I take the blame for siding with those who said, because I chaired the meeting. The politicians didn't come out. The real politicians, only a few of them came out. Okay, so what happened? Because they didn't trust the military, they weren't sure they were going. Those dedicated politicians of the 60s who, made mistakes of overzealousness, but really were driven by the people's, desires. And that's why you can see the kind of progress that they made back in those days. Those people sat back to watch, and all kinds of scoundrels entered the arena. The bagmen of military entered the arena. Then history was unfair to us. Oil prices went to 3 digits, past $100 a barrel. And these guys privatized the state and used those resources to set a barrier of entry into politics. So money began to define politics. When money began to define politics, we couldn't get good men, really good men, to go in. And our country has been in serious trouble since then. That fundamental error has cost us a generation. It has to be reversed. It may take a revolution, and this revolution may either be violent or through the ballot box, but it's inevitable. No country can continue like this. If you check my writings 25 years ago, 20 years ago, there's nothing that's happening today in Nigeria that I didn't have in pen and paper. It's not, you can read everything I projected will happen, it's happening today. These are unsavory things. And not because I'm smart, because I follow the trends of people who could easily, if you will, project these things. The people who've done this through history. It was easy to predict that we'll be where we are today in 2000, for example. Let me just take an example of violence that's everywhere. Robert Kaplan, an American, from far away there, projected the kind of ethnic cleavages that were building up, kind of economic cleavages that were building up, kinds of religious cleavages that were building up. Projected we could descend into anarchy. And actually was bold enough to suggest that this descent, or the convergence of these cleavages, come neatly, in a manner of speaking, together in a place in Nigeria called Jos.
Oh dear. And
if you track what has happened, began with those Jos riots. What was my personal reaction to reading Kaplan 20-something years ago? It was to say, look, society must be proactive to stop these things. First, I bought lots of copies of his book and sent to people I knew who were in policy-making roles. And they admit today that I did do that.
Did they read it?
Well, to be fair, a friend of mine who was DG of the SSS did read it. In fact, one morning I was out of the country and he calls me. He says, Patu, where is that your friend Kaplan? I said, which my friend Kaplan? He said, I just finished reading the book. My phone rings. justice on fire. That was the beginning of our journey here.
Let's take the economy, for instance. It's clearly key, very important. But the budget, incidentally, is an abstract to a lot of people out there. But yet it is a very important document. Now, for those out there, I mean, people who may see it as an abstract, who think it doesn't have anything to do with their business, what is it you think that they should actually focus on and pay attention and probably should influence their decision if they go out there on February 25 and on March when they go out there to vote?
What do they consider the biggest challenge they have as a country? Significantly today is an economic challenge. And that economic challenge has created a social challenge in terms of violence. People who have nothing to lose are easy to be recruited as cannon fodder for people who have all kinds of causes that they are pursuing. We need to massively create jobs in this economy. I mean, when I meet people who've been out of university 10 years and have never had a job, I know there is a brewing crisis. Not a brewing crisis, it's waiting to explode. You need bold and imaginative thinking that can put these people to work and that can give people hope for the future. Right now, most Nigerians think there's no hope. And their first reaction is to want to leave. I went to New York for a conference and I took the train into central New York from JFK. And it was a big mistake. I should have just suffered through the traffic because when I got out and I had to walk down to 38th Street Station, that long subway area, I ended up in 3 national conferences. Because as I run into one group of Nigerians and then they stop me. And then we have a national conference. So in one particular case, a couple she said, look, I was born here in New York because my father did Andrew. And then when things got better, my family returned to Nigeria. I went to primary school in Nigeria, I went to high school, I got married, and we're back here. And then you ask, if people are leaving, is it because they don't have the capacity to do things well? But here's pushback. 70% of doctors of color in the United States today are Nigerian. You meet a black doctor in America, 70% chance he's Nigerian or she is Nigerian. Now, these Nigerians who are to leave Nigeria are now considered perhaps the single most prosperous nationality group living in North America, Canada and the United States. So we lose our best talents because we have a system that lacks merit. It doesn't take the best. And it's not just that we lose those talents. Those people who are not competent, who have taken over the system, just compound things because 80% of decisions they make are made in ignorance. And a good part of decisions are made in self-interest rather than understanding the common good. Eventually, it flows back to harm them even more. So, having a broad philosophy of how human history is shaped and what makes for human progress is critical to the kind of politics we must have. And there seems to be a loss of this. People seem to think politics as some transactional thing. You know, you help me carry ballot box, I appoint you this, and that kind of thing. But it's much more than that. It has degraded our country. And somehow we need a new generation socialized differently to understand that politics is not just a game where you go to get something. And politics is where you go to seek immortality. You know, where you've built capacity, or you go there so that you'll be remembered forever for certain things that you do. Many of the fellows who are in the arena right now don't understand these things. And you can't blame them. They don't know. They're not wicked, they just don't know. Ignorance, they say it's not an excuse, but well, yeah, it's real.
Well, I do not know. I'm looking at the contenders right now on the scene. Looking at I know we're talking about how the economy is key, but I'm looking at the contenders on the scene. I'm looking at Rabiu Musa Kwankwanso, who's been there for a while. I'm looking at the candidate that the Big Tent has adopted, the candidate of the Labour Party. He's also been around for a while. He was governor of Anambra State as well, and also vice presidential candidate to the PDP presidential candidate. PDP presidential candidate too has been contesting for a while, and he was vice president of this country from 1999 to 2007. Also looking at Bola Tinubu, candidate of the APC, who's been governor of Lagos State. And all of these people, they all have something that they all say that they're bringing to the table. Why have you settled for the candidate of the Labour Party?
First, let me say that it's a pity that all we are looking at is the presidency. I'll come back to that. The biggest problem we have in Nigeria are the governors, because they don't understand their role. They don't have the, well, let's say they don't have what it takes to run, most of them, run a country. They're just transaction players.
Well, some people will say the reason why we've done that is because you talk about the culture. I mean, you talk about how Abuja froze, for instance.
No, I'm coming to the presidency and why it's important, but I'm trying to say that we should probably broaden the conversation in that regard. Look, Nigeria grew the way it grew at independence because of the subnationals. Subnationals were at the heart of the growth of this country, and I can give you a couple of examples. And it is unfortunately because some excess happened in the way that they competed that we then got the military coming. But if you look at the heart of what they did, let's take industry. We're talking about industry now. How did they go into industrialization? Okay, Premier of the West decides, look, I'm going to go out and build an industrial park or estate or whatever they called it back then and get investors to come in. That's how the Ikeja industrial estate came. The East responded very, no, these people cannot do us. They went Transamadi in Port Harcourt and Aba. In fact, the East enticed away some companies like Pfizer who had moved into Ikeja to relocate to Aba. Then the North, Kakuri, in Kaduna. Some thinking that is dominant in the way I think we must change industrialization in Nigeria, so-called idea of latent comparative advantage. The Southern realized that the factor endowment in which the North was very strong was cotton, production of cotton. Invited these Hong Kong Chinese. Look, we talk about export-led industrialization as something we should aim for. They started it in 1960. First factory in Kaduna in 1960 began by exporting to Britain. First 6 months production was all sold out in Manchester. Before they started business, in 1 month they broke even. So all of those brought a certain clear progress to Nigeria, and they were subnational led. How many subnationals are doing those kinds of things today?
All right, but we need to go to break. But we'll return and continue this conversation. Don't go away. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We are with Professor Pat Utomi, convener of the Big Tent. You were making a point as to why you settled for the candidate you settled for.
Right. So, having made the point about subnationals and the problems that we have in Nigeria, does the presidency matter? Absolutely. Because the tone is set very strongly from the top. How can we move from transactions to a transformational kind of leadership? In looking at the candidates, it was pretty clear to me that as political parties, some had reached irredeemable points unless major restructuring of those as political parties took place. How do you become candidate of the PDP or the APC? And you're talking to somebody who's been in all of them, or understands all of them, and has played from their founding. I was there at the founding of the PDP. I was there at the founding of the APC. My critical position was always there, but I was there at the founding. These parties, in the way they are structured, are so transactions-driven that to emerge in the process, you've already sold the country off. Committed to oil wells to this guy. You've committed to that ministry to this guy, and he is asking that X percentage of the budget of that ministry will come to him. And I'm not talking about stuff in the air, stuff I've dealt with, I've seen every day, I've spoken out personally one-on-one to all of them about. Okay? And so, fundamentally, I came to a conclusion years ago that neither the PDP nor the APC can bring out a candidate that can change Nigeria dramatically for good the way it was going. That's how the whole concept of third force, as some people like to call it, came up. We need to. How did the APC get founded? I gave a lecture here in Abuja, Leadership Newspapers, annual lecture, I think it was 2012. And the title was Political Parties. I went to the very base of thinking around this 1911 book by a guy who, Roberto Michels, who looked at political parties and the challenges with them. And I made the point about the so-called iron law of oligarchy and how he who says organization says oligarchy. How are we going to free thinking such that we can get a new order? I remember when I finished the lecture here at the Sheraton, Ladikwali Hall, I believe it was, Dr. Paul Unongo ran up to me and said, I wish, and almost all the leaders of the opposition were present at that, were sitting on the high table. And they ran up to me and said, I wish I could lock this door. You people should not leave this place until they do what you are talking about. And I said, well, I hope it happens. The process, in one way or the other, resulted in what became the APC. But I could tell you, just within weeks of the election, that we got it wrong. It was state capture, get-go. And I began to think, something different has to happen to save Nigeria. So, the reason that I would not touch a candidate of the PDP or the APC is that I know that they will not take Nigeria forward. They will get into these transactions, their friends will get rich, but Nigeria will still be stuck. So we needed a new kind of platform. So that's the first thing that recommended the new order. P2B came along into it fortuitously because there's some personal strengths that it brings to that rebuilding thing. Even though he's played in the system, if you look at his Anambra experience, let's not forget that P2B, amongst the things that he's done, is rebuild democracy. Anambra, they used to lock up their governors in the toilet and stuff. And what do they call these goons that own estates?
Godfathers.
Godfathers, just cutted away. Schools were closed. Everything was shut. For literally years. I mean, 2 years they didn't go to school or something. No pension benefits were being paid. No. Then he comes through that process. Anambra becomes a new kind of place. The democracy begins to thrive. Every pension was paid. All this. So, from what I know of him, he has the transformation mindset. And that's something me made about he's stingy. My goodness, the only thing you need now is a stingy man to run Nigeria. The guys are bleeding the place. You need the guy to stop this nonsense. Stop the bleeding.
That's really my colleagues in Lagos.
Prof, I'm delighted that you went down memory lane speaking about how some things happened earlier on in our life as a nation. So permit me to take you to one of those issues that you raised, which is concerning corruption. Now, those who would argue that as far as corruption is concerned, it dates back well into pre-independence in Nigeria. There are those who would point to the fact that, one of the reasons for which the First Republic ended was because of corruption. I remember reading an article ascribed to Chief Obafemi Awolowo, late Obafemi Awolowo, that the politicians of the day they preferred imported products as opposed to things that were made in Nigeria. The same thing for the Second Republic. The national chairman of the ruling party at the time was so rich, so to speak, that he had a bottle of champagne, you know, made in his name. Definitely wasn't just one, I would imagine. Same for the Third Republic, perhaps. And normal people will say we've always been on the precipice as far as corruption is concerned, and our economy is always in jeopardy as a result. There are those who would then point to the fact that these are structural issues that have persisted until now, even while you were in government, as you said. So what is going to be different? What has to be different this time around? Because the structures seem to be there still.
If you look at all of human history, the thing that has prevented untoward things from happening are institutions. You have strong institutions, you have boundaries, and people behave within those boundaries, not because they are good people, but because there are consequences for behaving outside of the boundaries that are accepted. I mean, almost all intelligent writings on how the West grew rich go back to the place of institutions. You want to go to Neil Ferguson's grand tour in the book Civilization, or you want to go to more of the institutional economics school kinds of people's writings. Institutions are critical. So institutional transition from colonial times with the Kabiyesi syndrome made it more difficult to get these boundaries in place quickly enough. And that led to some corruption. But it was still a much more, if you will, dignified territory. You found, for example, and I like to give this example because the person who tells this story, I have to give him the credit for, is Dr. Dakpo Fafura, was ambassador, senior civil servant from the 60s and 70s. Fafura tells the story about how a minister, a certain very powerful minister in the Balewa government, was traveling to his hometown in Abeokuta, and the car broke down and he had to go to a mechanic. And they fixed the car, he got a receipt that he paid for fixing the car, the official car. Came back, submits a receipt to get a refund. The permanent secretary looks at the receipt. It turns out the date was a Saturday, and he queried the minister's use for an official car on a Saturday. And the prime minister was bound to remove the minister for that error. But the prime minister was very close to this very powerful minister and had to plead with the PAMSEC, say, look, please, 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 this will be such a blow to my government if my close ally is... So he had to be punished anyway, and so he was demoted to a smaller ministry. That was... You just imagine that's happening today. So back in those days, yes, there always was some corruption, but not the kind of wholesale corruption that you have today, accepted almost as it were by the civil service, by everybody. And so it gets worse. So yes, there was corruption back then, and there were institutional checks. Had our institutions continued to evolve, and if you understand institutions, you'll find that one of the best writings on institutions and their impact on performance was that of Douglas North, who won a Nobel Prize for his work there. And the point that North makes is that institutions evolve. They are a function of all our getting together as civil society, as I say, no, this is not acceptable, this is... And then eventually becomes a settled habit of the community.
Well,
so institutions could have checked the corruption that was there in the system if we continue to strengthen our institutions.
But perhaps that's where the
problem is. But what has happened
is
that with military rule, it got worse. Yeah.
Perhaps, Prof, that's where the problem is actually, because there was some corruption and it was not decisively dealt with. And there is a known fact. What you sow, you will reap if you do not remove the seed on time. And perhaps that's one can also say that that's the progression then. It will be remiss of us to not talk about the economy at all with you this day. But successive budgets over the years always sought to resolve economic challenges. But then that virus of corruption seems to always eat away at the heart of whatever intention the budgets usually have. This budget, 2023 budget also, for instance. What's your take on that?
Well, I have said for many years that I don't discuss budgets for a simple fact that I don't think that the institutional arrangement in Nigeria takes budgeting seriously. I have actually described the budget process in Nigeria as a joke. Why did I do that? Back when I first came back around 1982, after every budget, the analysts, and I used to be invited to analyze budgets back in those days, would say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, blah, 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 blah. Then in December, they would say, oh, poor implementation. And I would say, nonsense. What do you mean poor implementation? A plan, a policy that does not look at the problems of implementation was ab initio a bad policy. So don't blame implementation. Nigerians say, oh, the problem is implementation. Is not true. Because you see, many times when budgets are being made in this country, people know that those who have authority don't follow the budget anyway. You have a state governor or government, and they put out a budget for the year. Nobody talked about painting the governor's lodge. And a friend comes to governor and says, my friend, why is this governor's lodge yellow? You are promoting MTN. He said, hey, really? Paint the thing green. Say, there's nowhere in the budget where you say paint budget, but they are painting the thing green. And the friend says, you're not promoting that other telco. Hey, paint it red. So I decided more than 20-something years ago that I was not going to discuss budgets. And I said so to one of your colleagues, Shehu, when they tried to drag me into a budget discussion. So we need to rebuild the civil service. I mean, we can't get anywhere in all we're talking about if we don't deconstruct and rebuild the civil service. It is not what it was
Prof,
when the Philip Asiodos were permanent secretaries.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Prof. In rebuilding the civil service, we may need to also, yet again, explore the leadership challenge, which is why I want to take you back to some part of your commentary. I noted that you talked about 2015 when the current president was elected. Abuja practically froze, and there was some form of institutional behavioral change, however momentary it was. And afterwards, not long afterwards, it was business as usual yet again. What exactly happened at that point? Don't you think that it flows from the top? What did the top, or in other words, the current president didn't follow up with that should have sustained that behavioral change?
The people he appointed were known corrupt people, very well known corrupt people. And some people say, what's he talking about? And that's it. That was the end.
So what's going to be different if the candidate that you have endorsed is elected? Wouldn't it be business as usual when he settles into office and, things just go back to where they were from the beginning?
I would definitely hope not. I will be the first to call him out, which has always been my style. We must realize that what is at stake is so big, the future of our children, almost so mortgaged already. We must realize that we have come to a point where something fundamental, a discontinuous push, if you will, has to happen for us to save our country. And this is why Peter Obi, our presidency, has a lot that it owes the future. And if he does not, if he starts by appointing some of these funny characters, well, he will hear from me, I can assure you that,
I know that oftentimes most leaders want to But then you look at the consequences. Let's take a look at fuel subsidy, for instance. The Buhari administration, before it came into office, in fact, the president said that he doesn't believe that there's anything called fuel subsidy. And people have just automatically assumed that it was going to go. We've seen the flip-flops in terms of fuel subsidy, but almost every single party now is saying fuel subsidy is something that we're going to take away. The candidate of the Labour Party has said it's organized crime. That of the APC says it's going to take it away. I'm not very certain if that of the PDP is saying that yet, or as clearly as other parties are saying it. But I'm wondering what the implications of that will be, because already we're seeing that the price, they are forcing it to stay at a certain price. And when that eventually happens, what do you think the immediate implication will be?
Well, first of all, nothing happens in vacuum, in space. Everything is within context. There are countries that have subsidies to drive certain goals. If you just have subsidy just to have subsidy, you just create opportunity for abusers to thrive. Look, there's a friend of mine who owns an oil marketing company. He's considered a very rich person. And one day he was in my home with several people, and I said to him, you know that your business is really a fraud. He looked up at me, I looked at people, and I said, you know why it's a fraud? Everywhere in the world, petrol is the ultimate commodity. It is so commodity, the margins are so thin that you really can't make money selling petrol. You have to take advantage of the fact that it's an essential commodity, everybody needs it. And so they drive into your forecourt to buy petrol. Then you see, what can I sell them I can make money off of? This is why you will see Minimart from Mobil, you will see Bonjour from Total. That's where they make their money, not from the sale of petrol, because it's the ultimate commodity. But in Nigeria, once you own a petrol marketing company, rich man, it's a farce, it's a fraud. So I think we have to come to some fundamental understandings of economics. The dirigist mindset of state control is used to create rent champions. And one of the areas is easiest to create a rent champion is with this business of petrol, its processing, its distribution, and all of that. A friend of mine used to be managing director of the Warri refinery when it worked back in those days. In fact, the poor man jackpot a long time ago, because he just couldn't take it anymore in Nigeria. He said, look, and because politicians have managed to make it, whether they're soldiers or civilians, people, there's no petrol, there are queues. So people who worked in NNPC, Warri refinery back in those days, would, on Friday evening, suddenly create a crisis. One part has broken, the part has broken, and the guy knows the consequence. He could be removed the next day. Okay, what will it cost? I need to fly to London tonight to go and bring the part. Friday evening, he approves $200,000, whatever. The guy goes to his garage where the thing is sitting and brings it down. He knew that was going on. So it has been organized crime for a long time, the whole petrol business.
What I'm saying is, what do you think the implications
that's what I was coming to. The mindset is that dirigist mindset that allows it. If you say petrol, everybody who can import and sell petrol with certain standards, please go out and import and sell petrol. The price will come to what it should be. That's the market concept. We don't have a market, and that's why people are playing these games. If we had a market, look, in some cities where I've spent time in the United States of America, there are people who travel right across town to the other side to go and buy petrol. Because they're selling petrol in their side of town, 4 or 5 cents per gallon or whatever it is, a liter, more than across town. And they will drive right across a huge city to go and buy petrol. Markets work. When you push markets out, they're just trying to find opportunities to scam people, make some people rich. And in that way, you impoverish others.
A fine place to anchor. Professor Patomi, convener of the Big Tent. Thank you very much for coming on, and all the best, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We will be back in a moment. We'll still be talking about governance and what should we do to get it right. That is when we return in just a moment. Join us again. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, we've got Professor Cyprian Edward Ekpo joining us next. He is the Director General, Institute of Law Research and Development of United Nations in Washington, D.C. He is the Principal Executive Officer, Universal School of Eclectic Analysis, Research and Legal Studies in London, Registrar, International Institute for Humanitarian and Environmental Law. He's also an author, 6 decades, a missing president. You say, why Nigeria fails? Why Nigeria fails? Yes. Wow. Well, now I have to talk about how to fix it. Well, first and foremost, looking at the entire scenario, look, the build-up, it's another scenario. We're focusing on the president, the governors, electing several people across the country. Yes. So having written those books, you must have been observing what's been going on and how we're all going on with this process. What stands out for you?
And what is it?
What stands out in terms of, you've written about why Nigeria fails.
Yes.
Are there signs, do you see any signs whatsoever that this time we may just get it right, either from the structure, from the people, or where?
Well, I think that if we miss a step, the right approach, Nigeria will move from a failed state status to the collapsed state status. And it's very close. I think the cap is quite close. And so the citizenry, we have to be very, very cautious this time around, especially during this electioneering process. They have to be cautious about their choice, and they have to be cautious about what's their drive, the political drive is all about. They have to detach from that primitive drive of personal interests and ethnic chauvinism, regional-based politicking to issues of development. And when they understand the problem of Nigeria, is the causal factors of the problem of Nigeria, because the leaders and the citizens detached from issues of development to issue of personality. That is the baseline. That is the foundation of all the crises. So the citizenry have to come to terms that politics is not all about personal interest, it's not all about ethnic and religious best interests, that what we need at this time, at this moment, is to look at an aspect of development. How would a country move from developing or underdeveloped state to developed state? And that has to be driven by ideology that is tied to development.
So in your observations and writings,
yes.
So is it that what makes or what causes things to fail, are they not obvious to us all, or is it that we see them but it's difficult for us to do? What do you think of it?
Yeah, the whole issues arise from an aspect of orientation. We have orientation problem. I was talking with a friend yesterday in a program, and everyone keeps saying Nigerian problem is corruption, corruption, corruption. That is not a problem. Corruption is the aftermath of the foundation problem. That is intellectual poverty. Nigeria has a problem of intellectual poverty. What I mean by intellectual poverty, sometimes when you mention it, even professors, standing members of the academia, believe that it has to do with a collegiate degree. That is not a problem. They will tell you, Nigerians are well educated, they are well positioned in academic world, and all that. That is not education. Education means having the necessary corporate and public policy experience with character that can enhance development. That means you are properly informed. So the problem we have in Nigeria is that people are not well informed. People are being collegiate. And you even see the passion, the penchant for being educated or going to school in Nigeria is just to acquire certificate. That's where the problem is. So intellectual poverty is a major problem of Nigeria. And it's not going to change easily until we are able to think of how do we fashion out a mechanism that can use orientational program to change the concept of the people. For example, the you don't read. Hardly you see Nigerians reading. They are interested in obscene publication, people cause it big, or someone's marriage has failed, all those sort of things. So you see the level of the mentality. So that is where the problem is. So having a knowledge-based system, Nigeria is not a knowledge-based system, it's an anti-intellectual society.
Well, some people will say that as the world develops, you know, there are a lot more distractions now for young people, and you know, social media can either be a tool for them to learn, or it could be a tool of, extreme distraction, depending on how you look at it. We've also seen all manner, even the media. We're not completely left out, and there are different types of media nowadays. But I am wondering, does it have anything to do, because this subject of development and democracy oftentimes go hand in hand. When we were under military rule, a lot of people felt that Nigeria's growth was stunted because we are under a military administration. And now, 24 years into a civilian administration, they're wondering what precisely is going on. So do you think that this education which you speak of still manifests itself regardless of whether or not it is a democracy or it is a military rule?
Yeah, let me correct a misconception. Democracy is not a guarantee for development. That's why you see some countries that are not democracies. Some democracies are failed states, while some countries or nations that are not democracies are well-developed countries. I don't think, what do you call this country? North Korea is not a democratic nation.
Is it a developed country?
Of course, in technology. Science and that's why they can look at United States face to face and say, oh, you do this, I will release my missile. That's a developed country. It takes knowledge to develop the missiles. That's the knowledge system. Saudi Arabia is not democracy. It's a developed country. It's a country that you can depend on their GDP. Their GDP growth is good. It's viable. It's credible. It takes care of the problems of the country and the citizenry. So the misconception of that democracy guarantees development. No, democracy only guarantees human rights. So that distinction has to be made. That's why it's the best form of government in the world conception, as we see. It guarantees human rights. So, but it doesn't guarantee development. What guarantees development is knowledge-based system. So, but you see the country problem of Nigeria. Our hopes that Nigeria or the Nigerian public will one day see the first level of development and security has become a euphemism. What's the problem? The problem is because governments and public service is filled up with mediocrity. And when you have that kind of system, what do you expect from a less knowledge-based system? You don't expect any development because the ideology will be driven by something lower than standard, the world standard or normal standard. Mediocrity drives abnormality. So that's where the problem is. So Nigerians must come to that terms. So where you have people who are not intellectually based people, I'm not talking about college certificate. You have to have that distinction. What they look at is someone they will not suspect the superiority of knowledge that can challenge them. They look at loyalty, look at psychophancy. That is the base. And when you operate from that level, you can't have it right.
All right, let me bring in our colleagues in Lagos.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. Professor Cyprian, since you aver that not all democracies guarantee development, and in fact there are some institutional monarchies that are more developed than some democracies, what do you think would be better suited, to guarantee development in Nigeria? What form of government? What form of government do you think is suited?
Yeah, democracy is fine for every reasonable man. Every reasonable man in this contemporary world. Democracy. Democracy. But not pseudo democracy. What we have in Nigeria is pseudo democracy. We are not yet developed democracy. Nigeria is not a developed democracy. We have pseudo democracy. And that's where the problem is.
So how can this pseudo democracy be addressed? Prof, can you hear me? Prof?
Yes, I can hear you.
So how can this pseudo-democracy in Nigeria be addressed?
The destiny of Nigerians is in the hands of Nigerians. But before you get to that, that's why we talk about the issue of orientation. We have an agency like National Orientation Agency, but I don't think it's working. I don't think it's working. Because you first of all have to give people the proper orientation. What development is all about. What are the factors that galvanize? What are the factors that enhance? What are the factors that sustain sustainable development? The people must first of all understand that distinguish it from primitive trajectory and be able to follow the pattern that really guarantees development. I was talking with one Christmas period. Let me give you a scenario. Christmas period. I visited a friend and with a federal high court judge. And when I was about leaving there, so I look at the kids. There's the elder one, is about, I think, final year medical student. So I gave her some money. I think on $100. So, and then the second one, the little child. That's not up to, I think, should be 7 years or so 7, 8 years. So I gave her just 1,000 naira. Because I look at, he may not need, have much need of money. And he didn't tell me thank you. So the sister said, why don't you tell Uncle thank you? He says, for 1,000 naira. Why would I tell him thank you for 1,000 naira? So when I told the parents, they were laughing. All these children are conscious of money. I said, that's not supposed to be so. You should be conscious of how to read novels at that level. How to ask questions. How did they develop aeroplanes? That's why the children from developed world, that's how they think. That's why you have someone like Elon Musk. That's why you have someone like, what's this guy that's founded Facebook? Yeah, so you see the orientation rises and stop in money. So you first of all have to bring the consciousness of the people to the fact that that is not what guarantees life and happiness. That what guarantees life and happiness is knowledge-based system and character, just like what Nigerians are after. Nigerians talk too much about personality, especially during the electioneering period.
Well, Prof, I wonder if that would be the only problem with what you call. I wonder if that would be the only problem with what you call Nigeria's pseudo-democracy.
I'm losing you.
Prof, can you hear me? Yes, I wonder if that would be. I wonder if that would be, personalities of a concentration on personalities and money factor. I wonder if that would be the only problem with Nigeria's democracy. Some would say that the inability to manage her diversities also constitutes a problem, which also is a base for the continuous call, regardless of administration and republic, for restructuring. Do you see that also as a stumbling block to, development and Nigeria's peculiar kind of democracy?
Yes, let me come to that. I really strongly hold a view that focus on personality instead of issues of development is one of the major problems of Nigeria. In fact, it's the central focal force of all the problematic forex. Now, for example, that's what gave birth to a book like Six Decades, Amazing President. I was studying the manifestos of all the current presidential candidates. And I look at it all, and I think some of them map out their manifestos after they declared their intention to become president of the federal of Nigeria. That alone is the first point indication of failure, because you don't plan presidency after you have made a declaration. You plan presidency years before time. That means you understand the problems of the country and you want to solve it, and you want to help the country because you have studied it before over time before you can now come out and say I want to be president. Not circumstantial element bringing you to become president. And I saw people say traveling outside the country, they want to go and study this after declaration of intention to become president of the federal republic. Now, that's not a serious country. Are people listening to those people? They're not serious. Now, when I look at it, and that's how I arrive at what is the former vice president, Atiku Abubakar's 5-point agenda. I think that is the only pragmatic development plan we have now. Among all the candidates, I've looked at Tinubu, former governor of Lagos State manifesto. I can't distinguish between that of Moshood Abiola of 1993. That is plagiarism. And that the world of today is no longer the world of 1993. It's an advanced technological world right now. We are. It's a digital era. Right now we are. So why did you go and copy something of 1993? Antediluvian agenda to apply in this contemporary world. So I've looked at Peter Obi and manifesto, right? Look, fantastic, but full of academic ideologies.
Yeah. A host of issues that you have raised here now, I mean, it's speaking to choices that people need to make and, options that they have to look at. By the way, you may want to kindly avoid rubbing your hand against the microphone on your jacket. So, but the question here now is about leadership, about selecting the right people to do the job that Nigerians need them to do. We have to use political platforms. So if you could, in maybe a minute or two, speak to ideological politics in our country today. There is the challenge of choice based on the position of a particular political party. The Third Republic, there are those who would say, perhaps held the most divergent of political views. There were Social Democrats, there were Republicans. It was clear. In the First Republic, we had something similar as well. But today, it would seem like almost all the parties have similar political, agendas, political ideologies. Everyone wants to be socialist and all of that. So in terms of getting political ideology that can fit into a national vision, how do you suggest that the political class should go about that so Nigerians have a choice of this product or that product, as opposed to just a generic one that any one of them will seem to fit the bill?
Yeah, first of all, let me correct misconception. Nigeria does not have political ideology, and none of the Nigerian political parties have political ideologies. None. That's why you see people moving from one political party to the other, moving one and that. It's all tied to personal interests, regional best interests, and all sort of mantras. Now, before you get the country to evolve to that level of political ideology, which of course drives development, you first of all have to start with the mechanism of orientation that we talk about. We haven't gotten there. But right now, what we can rely on, let's look at the agenda of each of the political parties or each of the politicians.
We'll come to that, Prof. Just 1 second. We'll come to that. Just 1 second, Prof. We'll come to that. But just so Nigerians can know what direction to look at, because as you noted, each of the political parties seem to have a generic ideology, so to speak. The only thing different is that of the agenda that each one of these politicians are looking at. But the interesting thing is, in the laws that govern our democracy, no individual should stand for himself. Each individual should come on the platform of a political party, hence underscoring the importance, the crucial importance of political ideology, which we do not have now. But in terms of discovering or at least charting some form of perspective for Nigerians, what should people be looking out for, especially when it comes to political ideology? I know you said we don't have, but we have political parties. So what should people be looking out for, and what should guide the choice of who they choose as governor or president in the coming election?
Yeah, you can't put something on nothing and expect it to stand. Nothing exists in a vacuum. The only thing, at time I've heard something exists in a vacuum, which scientifically people look at it and say, is this really true? Is the story you read in the book of, in the biblical Genesis, that the world was void, and then all of a sudden it came to exist. So I haven't heard of anything being placed in a vacuum before. So you don't have political ideology, you don't have. So right now you have to work with what you have. And that is what may launch in political ideology. And the book I write called Shackles, the proclivities and the root cause of Nigerian perennial failure, really give a solution to this issue we're talking about, how to get it there. When you read it, you know, Nigerians read it. The problem of Nigerians, they hardly read. That's the truth. Even the political leaders, the people in governments, they don't even read letters written to them. That's very, very unfortunate. And but if we can start now, before the new generation comes in, maybe we may not be the beneficiaries. Maybe the new generation may be the beneficiary. We can start now to install, get the orientation across to the incoming, the younger ones and all that. We may be able to get it right one day. But for now, let's work with what we have.
Okay, Prof, on that same issue,
among the political parties,
I appreciate, the position that you've held now, but you started something out earlier about the leadership question. And the natural question that came to my mind, interestingly, we were having a conversation around leadership choices just before we came on air. And one of the examples that we gave among ourselves here in the studio is, when you see someone driving, you question the way the person is driving until you get behind the wheel. Then you discover that he has the brake failure, the rear view mirror is not working, the indicators are not working, the steering is faulty, the gearbox is faulty, and all of that. So, but in terms of this next election, we are planning to recruit people who are just showing us their resumes. We don't know whether or not they will do well. We are literally taking a risk employing any one of them. What should Nigerians be looking out for in the choices they are about to make? There are 18 presidential candidates and countless political parties, vying for a good number of governors, people vying for the office of governor across all 36 states. In these choices, because Nigerians will literally be taking a risk, either employing a new one or renewing the license to continue the job they're doing as governors. What should Nigerians look out for in a potential leader?
Yes, I have already made a reference at the national level. I won't talk about governors because I don't talk about what I haven't understudied, what I haven't analyzed. I didn't go to each of the states to understudy the programs of each of the governors or governorship candidates. But I know that if you can fix it at the national level, it's like a vibration. Before you know it, it's spiral, and across the country, everything will change, the narrative will change. So right now, as I said, let's leave political parties aside. I'm not a politician. So let's leave political parties aside.
Yes, Prof. Let's talk leadership. Sorry to jump in. Let's talk leadership as we wind down.
Yes.
When you say 6 decades of a missing president, what does that mean?
Yeah, for the past 60 years, what has made Nigeria fail, that book gives you the narratives of it. From 1960 independence to the present day, each of the political military regime and democratic administration, it gives you each of the factors that contribute to the failure of the Nigerian society of today. And that's why we now look at the solution. I say, why do we look at the solution? We are not politicians. You are not a politician, I'm not. So we can do it. We can only contribute through electioneering vote. That's the best we can do. So let's look at it. What do we have now on ground? I said, let's look at the manifestos, this governance work agenda of each of the presidential candidates and see which one can really address the Nigerian perennial problem of the moment. Now, I was able to arrive at that Atiku Abubakar's 5-point agenda. That is the current problem of Nigeria. That's what he addressed.
So what is it about his agenda that other parties or other candidates don't have one way or the other?
They don't have the same mechanism. His agenda encompasses element of pragmatism. Not Uveria kind of agenda. The problem is, we should be talking about, if he becomes president, how do we hold him responsible to fulfill that obligation? That's what we should be talking about. But that can address the current Nigerian problem. The insecurity issue, I've seen it, the unity, problem of unity, which are the current problem of Nigeria, the problem of education, economic dynamism, and the issue of the rule of law. Very fundamental. One of the bases, one of the factors, the causal factors to Nigerian failure, very fundamental, is rule of law, abuse on the rule of law.
So when you then talk about 6 decades of a missing president, why Nigeria fails, did you then factor in, when we had the regions were really strong, many always talked about how there was a lot of growth at that time, then much later, after that, things tanked. So would you still say that at that point, even though they say we did a lot better in terms of the economy, education, we still failed at that?
Yeah, I address that equally. There was some level of failure. That's why you didn't have it. Continuing, that pattern didn't continue because it couldn't be sustained. But I've provided solutions. And that Tiku's 5-point agenda is also trying to work towards a solution. So the problem is, how do we get this to be implemented? Because we have a lot of lofty ideas sometimes from some people. I remember in 2014, the National Conference, hosted by President Goodluck Jonathan, the then President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. There were some very good things like that. That like brought entire Nigerians, sat down together and said, this is our problem. But it was abandoned. So to look at how do we get the implementation to come to the surface, to come to materialization of it. I think that Atiku Abubakar's agenda addressed that. Problem you're talking about, the issue of federalism.
I know you also might have heard when people say that, look, a president is not just a president. What makes them succeed is the quality of people that are around them. So if other political parties, other candidates have quality people around them, they will equally succeed, perhaps even do better than the ones that other people thought would do better. But we'll have to go at this point in time. And thank you for coming on, Professor Cyprian Edward Egbo, Director General, Institute of Law, Research and Development of United Nations in the U.S., author, 6 Decades of a President, Why Nigerians Fail. Thank you for coming on. Let's take a look at some messages coming through. Let's see if there's any reference to what we've just talked about right now. There's one about leadership question. And this very first one says, there is an urgent need for a deliberate effort to institutionalize leadership. Leadership training as a prerequisite for taking up any elective position at national, state, and local government levels in Nigeria. Most of those elected into office today have no idea what leadership entails. They have no visioning capacity or value orientation. Nigeria needs visionary leaders with the right value systems to solve prevailing problems.
Well, Benjamin Onuche says, my wife and I transferred our PVCs to our village in Kogi. But because she just gave birth, we couldn't travel to Kogi for Christmas. Hence, we plan to be in Kogi during election. Most of the people who will want to vote in their villages won't travel down till a week or few days to the election. Please let the collection of PVCs continue till a week to election, because what's the essence of spending so much to print PVCs and millions will remain uncollected due to reasons stated above? That is from, looking for the name now. It just says, God bless Benjamin Onuche. It says, God bless Nigeria. And I say, amen.
Yeah.
Well, Henry Okeke chooses to speak about the leadership challenge, and this is what he says. Nigerians are eager to elect a new president and a new set of leaders, I believe, at the state and federal elections. We have a responsibility to encourage citizens' participation in the electoral process. INEC has done well by extending PVC collection deadline. So you do well also to go get your PVC.
Take a break off work if you can. Festus Akinboyewa says there would have been no need for people to physically go and collect their PVCs if we had digitized address system. Time we invest in Smart Nation and Smart Address System so that important documents like PVCs can be safely sent by post.
All right, quite interesting. Well, yeah, you can take a break from anything, from a lot of things. So you could pick up a book, a novel, an essay, just read something. You know, just if that works for you, if that's a way with which you could take a break, hey, that could also help. You know. Well, that is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. Yes, it's a Friday. Make the most of it while you can. But we will see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Malkwell Yusuf. Do have a great weekend.
Well, some people will be back here again tomorrow.
Some people will.
Yes, thank you for sharing your Friday morning with us. Make the weekend count. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Plan to get your PVCs tomorrow or Sunday. Amaya Makinde, have a wonderful rest of your day.